I'm not just negotiating for myself, I'm negotiating for my kids and their future and their life. I took a job 50% below my market value, and that changed everything. Growing up, I did always struggle a little bit with confidence, but also have had a very opinionated way of living my life. When I would think about jobs that I wanted to do when I grew up, I definitely had a knack for organizing and kind of bringing people together. I then discovered Yelp very early on in its early stages in Chicago and got very excited about reviewing local restaurants and finding new things. When I took the job for a Chicago community manager, it was like, I was so excited to get this job, I didn't negotiate at all. I started like as entry level as it gets, and after 9 years, I was the VP of all international community. The company had decided to roll back all of its community operations and sales operations internationally. And so while I was not part of that reduction in force, to me, it really felt like the end. And I felt very strongly that it was the door closing and that it was time for me to walk through. And then after coming out of that experience, I found out I was pregnant with my second child. I signed up for a platform that basically facilitated job openings for moms. And as being part of that platform, I ended up being matched with a role for them specifically, so their director of marketing. I had been very clear about what my compensation had been previously as a VP. When I got to the offer stage, I was really surprised that the offer was 50% of what I had previously been making. I think due to some of the confidence hits that I had taken and also being pregnant, I sort of was more willing to consider a lower compensation rate. So right from the beginning, there were always promises of, we'll catch you up at the next fundraise. We love your work. We see how much value you're bringing to the company. And so there was always a lot of promise for taking care of my career and my salary. About a year after I started, I had not had any compensation adjustments up to that point. And what had happened was my boss had come in and said, great, we got you a raise. And so I get pulled into a meeting. It's like, oh my gosh, we're gonna give you this promotion. You're gonna be promoted to Chief Community Officer. And then the very next sentence is, it doesn't come with any pay, but we'll get to that eventually. Getting a title increase without any compensation to me is not a promotion. Ultimately, that inner voice that kept saying like, you're being taken advantage of a little bit, got louder and louder, and I ultimately couldn't ignore it. And even with the very big fancy title and some degree of autonomy, like they were not going to care for my compensation, and I needed to be able to go do that elsewhere. The stakes were very high for me. Making a change at this point when you've been at a company for 3.5 years and you've built this company, I mean, I was like very invested in, but you cannot take a huge step back and expect that someone else is going to catch you up. So I started interviewing and understanding that I'm not just negotiating for myself, I'm negotiating for my kids and their future and their life. And it gave me a lot more strength and confidence to go into those conversations. Because you might be able to say like, oh, okay, like I can live on less and I can take a little bit of a hit, but ultimately I don't want my kids to take a hit. I had just decided I wasn't going to entertain any conversations where the compensation was not gonna meet the minimum for me. It was really hard to leave, but ultimately I ended up leaving and leaving for a role where I was gonna make, I think 60% more than I had been making. So nothing would have changed if I hadn't taken ownership of my own path. My biggest learning is that you are the one who will be able to drive the best outcomes for yourself. As you're looking at even making the small incremental asks really get you ready for making the bigger asks later. It's important to come armed with as much data as you can. There's so many more resources for this now than there used to be. So really coming armed with that data can make you feel like this is not emotional. This is about how I'm continuing to nurture my own compensation path in line with the work and the benefit I'm bringing the company. Negotiation is a bit of a loaded term. It can feel very scary, but ultimately you're negotiating in your own best interests. And if you aren't going to do it, who is? And that, our ability to say confidently what we need and want from a situation serves us not only at work, but in all relationships that we have in our lives. There are going to be seasons of your career, and while you're going to continue to need to advocate for yourself, you are going to get better at that, and it is going to work out.